a beautiful day here in San Diego County, and I'm at Rancho Santa Maria de los Peñasquitos to explore and learn a little bit more about the history of this area. And some of it might surprise you, so stick around. Here in Rancho Santa Maria de los Peñasquitos, one of the most prominent features is that of the ranch house, known as the Rancho Peñasquitos Adobe. Now, this was first built in 1823 by Captain Francisco Maria Ruiz, who was the Comandante of the Presidio of San Diego, which we actually explored in a previous video. This here is the Rancho Peñasquitos Adobe, which was first built in 1823 as part of the first Mexican land grant in all of San Diego County. Now, what you see here today was largely built and enlarged throughout the 1850s and 1860s, but portions of the original 1823 structure are actually built into the walls of part of this building. So the history is definitely here, and to see this as the second oldest adobe in all of San Diego County on this peaceful landscape and setting, just as it was 150 plus years ago, is pretty awesome. One neat thing I learned about this adobe is that from 1857 to 1860, the rancho was used as a way station or a stagecoach stop along the San Antonio-San Diego mail line. So even for a few years, passengers could stop here, rest, get a good meal as they pressed on towards San Diego. This here is the other side of the adobe. You can see it has essentially three parts to it and creates this courtyard here in the center. And they actually have a small museum in there. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to go in today, but they have some local artifacts and a little bit more about the history of the adobe and of the area. To know that most of this was constructed back in the early to mid 1800s and still stands here. And as mentioned, was even a stagecoach stop for a few years. Just need to actually stand here and see this and appreciate the architecture of it. It's a nice breeze coming through. It's actually a cooler, cloudy day here, and it is the perfect weather to walk around, let me tell you. One thing I just learned from reading the interpretive sign here, it's just talking about how this adobe and this property was handed down over the decades until the 1970s. Actually, in 1974, San Diego County acquired the property to prevent the building from being torn down, thankfully. And what we see today, these ranch buildings, are restored to what it would have looked like in 1862. So what it would have looked like over 160 years ago, back during the American Civil War. And that's neat. Again, it originated in 1823. It kind of got revamped to what you see today in the 1850s, 1860s when it was enlarged. So this is what it looked like in 1862. This building down here is the stone and mortar spring house. Now, there are actually two artesian wells here on the property that produce some beautiful clear water. And you can actually see it here bubbling up out of the structure and coming down into this, though the water looks a little murky right now and not very, I guess, appetizing, but is really pretty to just see and hear the water coming out of that well. Now, the actual building here was built to protect the well, but also just to provide some shade. This is one of the wells here on the property, and you can see how it literally just bubbles up and then proceeds out the side of the building. And I imagine with these other kind of jars and thing, they probably would have stored a lot of other things here to keep them cool in the shade and stuff.
Yeah.
That's interesting. That's really cool. Wow. I'm assuming this has probably been here for, you know,
as long as the rest of the building.
yeah, that is neat. Cool. Well, thanks for letting me take a peek at that. That is awesome. One thing I love about walking around preserves like this is seeing the different plants and wildlife. And this tree right here, this is a California pepper tree. These have always intrigued me. One, because they kind of remind me of weeping willows with how the branches sort of hang down. But this one here, it's got a really neat trunk like a lot of them do. And man, as a kid, this would have been the ideal climbing tree. But what's cool about this, as you can see, it creates essentially a canopy. So when you think about how hot it can get here in Southern California, having a pepper tree like this that, again, creates a canopy, a cover, and a lot of shade from the sun, these were pretty great to have around on the farm. So if you're taking a break and just trying to get out of direct sunlight, this is where I would come hang out for sure. All right, I just left the Rancho Peñasquitos Adobe, and now I'm heading down one of the many trails that they have here. And I'm actually searching for a grave marker. Now, from what I've researched, this is the only grave marker anywhere within Peñasquitos Canyon. I don't know if that's actually true, but it is an interesting, kind of unique aspect to the history of this canyon in this area. So we're gonna go see if we can find it and learn a little bit about that history. This here is known as the grave of Mr. John Eicher. From what I've learned, he's not actually buried right here. They're not exactly sure, but they do know he's buried here in the canyon, perhaps in this area. Now, John J. Eicher was believed to be a cook for the people that lived in the Los Peñasquitos ranch house in about the late 1800s. He was originally from Pennsylvania. He came out this way out west, born on August 7th, 1825, and he died on January 6th, 1882. So we were actually just a few days away from his death date. Here next to the grave, there's a sign all about John Joseph Eicher and about his life. As mentioned, he was born in Pennsylvania. Apparently, he was the great-grandson of a younger prince of the House of Eicher in Eichstätt, Bavaria, Germany. Wow. And it says, the prince with his wife and 2 children left for the New World around 1750. It's kind of amazing that they know this much about his life, but also very neat that they do. They know this much about his life, but we actually don't know where he's buried. Pretty interesting. I always like it when they mark off graves with its own fence. Here we see a white picket fence around John's memorial. Again, not sure if he's actually buried here. They don't believe he is. But here's a headstone that reads, in memory of John J. Eicher, born in Greensburg, Pennsylvania, August 7th, 1825, died January 6th, 1882. Rest in peace. And they even stacked up stones here along what would be where his body would be buried. This here is Peñasquitos Creek, which runs right along the trail opposite of Eicher's grave. It's amazing to see just how clear this water is. I don't think it's probably coming out on camera, but I would say in the center it's about 2 to 3 feet deep, and generally about a foot deep overall, but you can see the very bottom of this creek. Just beautiful seeing these leaves slowly meander down. Very, very interesting and unique to see that grave marker just kind of fenced off right off the trail out here in the woods, really. And it's pretty fascinating to think about all those who have come before us and, you know, where they may be laid to rest and where they lived and where they spent their time with their loved ones and where they worked. And I don't know, it's just kind of an interesting thought A little bit deeper than I expected to get today on this walk around, but nonetheless, a pretty interesting way to start off the new year. Well, this is nice. I'm just sitting underneath the pepper tree, relaxing, feeling the cool breeze on my face, listening to the animals in the distance, and kind of smelling that sweetness in the air that only nature could produce. It's a pretty peaceful and just nice way to end my time exploring Rancho Peñasquitos Adobe and the surrounding area. So that's going to be it for this one. Hopefully you enjoyed. Hopefully you learned a little bit along the way with me. Now it's on to the next journey.